On tonight's episode of Mr. Norris's In Case You Missed It, listen close and you shall hear the midnight ride of Paul Revere. Giddy up because the British are coming! Hey, hello, hi, and what is up, everybody? It's your host, Mr. Norris, the history teacher with the good hair. And tonight we're going to be talking about the midnight ride of Paul Revere in 1775. We're going to try to separate some of the fact from fiction and dive into exactly what happened that fateful night when he rode through the Massachusetts countryside. All right, when we last left off, we were talking about the Boston Tea Party and some of the ramifications that came after it, such as the Intolerable Acts, which were passed by the British Crown as a punishment on the colony of Massachusetts for their actions in said Tea Party, right? And we also started talking about how the colonies were beginning to come together and kind of decide things as a unit. They formed the first Continental Congress in Philadelphia to try to, figure out exactly what's going to go on here and all that good stuff. One thing that they do decide at the first Continental Congress is, we're going to boycott. We're going to meet again in a year from now. I outlined all of this in another video. They also decide that each colony should start forming their own militias and also start gathering their own weapons. They're not ready to declare independence yet or have an all-out, slug it out, drag it out fight with the British. But it's like that saying goes, they are hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, right? We want, things to go back to normal and King George to take away some of these acts that we really dislike. But if that doesn't happen, let's prepare, gather up weapons and start creating militias. And that's exactly what a lot of the colonies started doing in 1774 and 1775. Now, Massachusetts and Boston being the hotbed of the Revolution is no exception to this, right? They are forming militias and they are preparing. They're gathering up weapons and they're stationing them in a town about 20 miles outside of Boston called Concord. And late in the year of 1774, they kind of start escalating this. They actually raided a local fort and stole gunpowder from the British. And we're doing a lot of, annoying, nuisance kind of acts. I don't know what Newsom is, but nuisance kind of acts in and around the city of Boston that are starting to catch the attention of the British troops that are being stationed there. Now, after the Intolerable Acts were passed, a new royal governor was appointed to watch over Massachusetts Bay Colony, and that was General Gage. And he really starts to formulate in 1775 a plan for British troops to march from Boston to Concord to capture these weapons and to, kind of end this rebellion before it gets going here, right? Inside the city of Boston, however, though, there was like a little spy network of patriots and members of the Sons of Liberty who were watching the British soldiers that were stationed there. So the British soldiers are watching what's going on in Concord. Well, you're being watched right back there, boys, by some people right inside the city of Boston. Most noteworthy of these people is Paul Revere, one of the most prominent leaders of the Sons of Liberty. He's kind of helping organize this spy ring and setting up almost an alert system for how, they're going to deal with this if the British troops ever decide to leave Boston and march on the countryside. Now, helping him is a man named Dr. Joseph Warren, as well as others. And they start meeting in places like the Green Dragon Tavern, which I told you guys about, one of my favorite spots in Boston. And they start coming up with plans and schemes for, all right, how exactly are we going to be able to alert the countryside if these British troops do decide to move, right? Well, they devise a scheme that they're going to use this landmark called the Old North Church. And it has a really tall steeple inside the city of Boston at that time. You got to remember, there's no skyscrapers yet, so it's one of the tallest landmarks inside the city. And Paul Revere kind of sets up the deal with one of the people who work inside the church that if the British troops are ever leaving the city of Boston, I will come and alert you how exactly they're going to leave. And you need to send up a lantern system kind of alert in the top of the steeple for the countryside and people across from the Charles River to see. Now, if you look at this map right here, the two ways that the British troops would leave the city of Boston would either be through the bottleneck part of Boston that still connects to land, or they would literally cross the Charles River and go to the countryside that way, right? And Paul Revere says to the guy, look, if they leave through that bottleneck, you're going to put one lantern up in the steeple. And if they leave across the Charles River, you're going to put two up there, right? And that's where we get that saying, one if by land, two if by sea. And that's kind of how we're going to do this whole thing, right? Well, this spy ring actually catches wind in April that the British are going to move on these weapons, April 1775. And this was actually weeks before the midnight ride, so people kind of leave that out of the history. But they inform Concord, like, hey, they're going to come pretty soon for those weapons. And 3 weeks ahead of time, Concord is pretty much warned, and they move all the weapons outside of the town, and they're going to be secure going forward, right? Well, let's fast forward to April 18th, 1775, right? Dr. Joseph Warren catches wind on good information that this is the evening that the British are officially marching to Concord to try to seize these weapons, even though they don't know that they're all pretty much already gone, right? He goes and runs and tells his friend Paul Revere, hey, look, they're moving tonight. Paul Revere goes to the Old North Church, right? Rides his horse there, Brown Beauty, tells them there, hey, this is what's going down, right? And he's got good information that the British are going to travel across the Charles River in order to get to the countryside. That would be the fastest route. Makes the most sense. Paul Revere is going to do the same exact thing. He's going to also cross the Charles River to travel to the countryside to try to warn everybody that the British are coming. Maybe he can muster up some colonial militia and have a little bit of a resistance there, right? Now, first common myth, Paul Revere is the only rider. And false. Leaving Boston, he has another rider making kind of the same journey with him, and that's William Dawes. William Dawes, though, however, is going to travel from that bottleneck and alert the countryside going that way. Okay, so you have Dawes riding in one direction, Revere riding in across the river, not riding across the river. That'd be amazing if his horse galloped across the river, right? That's like some kind of miracle. But he's going to travel across the river on boat and then, ride through the countryside. Now, they leave Boston at about 10 p.m., and Paul Revere gets to Lexington, which is a town about halfway to Concord, at about midnight. Now, he stops there because he knows that two very prominent Sons of Liberty leaders are hiding out in Lexington because it really became no longer safe for them to stay in Boston. That's Sam Adams and John Hancock. Sam Adams is pretty much the brains behind the Sons of Liberty. John Hancock's pretty much the purse behind the Sons of Liberty. He's got a lot of money, right? And Revere stops there because he knows that Lexington's on the way to Concord, and the British troops that are going to eventually go to Concord will also probably stop there. And if they find Hancock and Adams, they're going to arrest them and they're going to hang them, right? So Revere goes to Hancock's house and he tells him, you guys got to get the heck out of here. The British are coming, the troops are coming, and you're going to be dead Fred if you're still here, right? So Revere gets there at midnight, and William Dawes shows up about a half hour later, right? One, because his route was a little bit longer. Two, because he stopped and got a Crunchwrap Supreme. You really can't blame them. They're fantastic. I'm just kidding. I don't think Taco Bell was around back then. Shame on them, right? That they didn't do that faster, because that's tremendous. Anyways, they decide to leave Lexington together and continue on the path to Concord and try to get there before daybreak and warn everybody that the troops are coming behind them, right? About a mile outside of Lexington, they meet up with a man named Dr. Samuel Prescott. He's going to become the third rider that evening here. So it makes Paul Revere, William Dawes, Samuel Prescott. Let's just pause right here for a second, okay? Because I know I've mentioned Paul Revere a bunch of times. Can we just talk about how much Paul Revere looks like Jack Black for a minute? They look exactly alike. If they ever make a movie about this, I want Jack Black playing Paul Revere. I'm saying it right now because it would be awesome to see him riding through the streets like, the British are coming, yeah, ha, rock on. Terrible Jack Black impression. I apologize. But I mean, it is uncanny. Exactly like each other, man. All right, so about a mile outside, where was I? About a mile outside of Lexington, you have Dr. Samuel Prescott, Paul Revere, and William Dawes. Prescott was actually returning home to Boston after a date with a female companion. And historians will say that he took her out to a lovely dinner at Outback Steakhouse where they enjoyed a blooming onion. I may or may not have made that all up, but blooming onion, also delicious. I'm sorry. I'm hungry right now, so I'm rambling a little bit, right? All right. So they gather together. Dr. Prescott is in. They're going to continue riding to Concord and, get this job done, right? Well, just a little bit down the road here, they get stopped by some British guards that are on the road. And Prescott hops over a wall and continues riding. He gets away, right? William Dawes, he rides off into the woods and actually just turns around and goes back to Lexington because he realizes that going forward, it's going to be a little bit dangerous. Revere gets captured. He gets knocked off of his horse and gets a gun held to his head. And they basically interrogate him. What are you doing out here? What are you up to? And Revere kind of tells them, hey, I just alerted the whole countryside, right? And, militiamen are going to be coming out. And these troops that are coming behind me, or the British troops that are coming behind me, they're going to be in big trouble when they get out here. And so Paul Revere actually never makes it all the way to Concord. The only one who does is Dr. Samuel Prescott. He gets there and warns them that, British troops are going to be there in the morning and that they need to be ready. All right. Let me just go back for a second. All along the way to Lexington and Concord, Paul Revere, William Dawes are stopping at households and warning, known patriot leaders, known militia leaders, colonial leaders, that the British are coming, right? One myth that I want to disprove right now is that they rode through the middle of the streets yelling, "The British are coming, the British are coming." That didn't happen, right? Number one, this is a secret operation, and there are guards all over the place and patrols all over the place. So if they're screaming in the middle of the street, those patrols are going to be like, "Hey, that guy's screaming in the middle of the street. Let's go arrest him," right? Also, the phrase, "the British are coming." Back then, they all considered themselves British. So if Paul Revere was screaming, "The British are coming," people might have yelled out their window, "Sir, you're going to need to be more specific. We all think that we're British," right? If I ran to your house and started screaming, "The Americans are coming, the Americans are coming," I'd probably get tasered and taken out of there in handcuffs and a straitjacket, right? So yeah, no, it was a secret operation. They were stopping door to door, places they knew they could that were safe, and alerting colonial militia, right? So Revere gets captured, doesn't make it to Concord. What does he do the rest of the night? Well, they take his horse from him. And some of these soldiers actually start hearing some of the first shots that are going on in Lexington, which I'll talk about in an upcoming video. And they ride ahead of Paul Revere. And Paul Revere basically just walks back to Lexington. He stops at this tavern called Buckman's Tavern, has a few drinks, stumbles out of it about 5 a.m., right in time to see the official first shots at Lexington, and then what would later take place that day as far as militia activity, going to Concord and then coming back. So, why do we give Paul Revere all the credit or the most credit? Well, a few years after this, a man named Henry Wadsworth Longfellow writes a really famous poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And in that poem, he pretty much gives, Paul Revere all of the credit when, we obviously know that he doesn't deserve all of it. Dawes did it. Samuel Prescott helped out. But then there's some historians that want to just give Paul Revere no credit. Yeah, he was super brave, did an awesome thing that night, and helped alert the countryside. The next morning, April 19th, we're going to see the first shots of the Revolutionary War fired, the shot heard around the world. So there you have it. There's a story of Paul Revere's midnight ride, some of the truths, some of the myths, all laid out there for you so you can sort things out. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, or subscribe. Any of that would just be fine. Remember that history is life. And in the words of George Washington, the surest basis for public happiness is knowledge. So go out there and get some. Have a good night, everybody.